Good morning.
Good morning.
Thinking back on my journey, I can remember being 5 years old and living on Langshaw Street in Old Trafford. I walked into the kitchen one day to find my mum was on the floor going cold turkey. And all I could think about was finding her medicine. That's what I called it back then. If I could find that, then I could make my mum better. You see, I'm the child of an addict. I was born in Manchester and I went to my first primary school in Old Trafford. I had no idea back then, but that school was going to be the first of 13 different schools I'd end up going to. When I was a kid, I didn't think my life was any different to anyone else's. It was only when I got to about 10 years old, and we were living in Radcliffe, that I realised my mum was an addict. Even my dad was an addict. And even though he didn't live with us, he did used to visit me from time to time. Whilst living in Radcliffe, drugs, alcohol and violence were on the scene a lot. So I'd just go out to get out of the way. And one time when I was out, I got myself into a fight with a boy from my class. And I ended up getting arrested for the first time ever and charged with ABH. I was only 11 years old and already I'd got myself a criminal record. Starting out at high school wasn't great. There was a lot going on at home. And in my first year there, social services came to speak to me. Mum had got herself into another violent relationship and had decided it was time to leave. So I was given a choice. I could stay there at that school and go into care, or I could go with my mum. Well, I'd been in care before and I didn't like it. So I chose to go with my mum, and we moved into a hostel in Rochdale. I was 12 years old when we moved into that hostel in Rochdale. And by the time I was 15, I was smoking weed daily, and I'd become a teenage mum. And who would have believed it? But by the time I was 17, I was back in that hostel, that very same hostel, with my own child, and for the same reason my mum was there. I was following in my mum's footsteps. I'd even started taking other drugs, like speed and ecstasy, and I dabbled in a bit of coke now and then. When I left that hostel, I'd got my own place. And by this point in my life, I'd not seen my dad for 9 years. But through my auntie, I'd got back in touch with him. And he started to visit regularly. I did used to think he was coming to spend time with me. But I never really got much time with him, because he spent more time upstairs with my mum, getting high on smack. One night, when my dad was staying at mine, he asked me to go out and get him some drugs. I didn't want to go, but he minded me. So eventually, I went out and I got him them drugs. Later that night, my dad took them drugs and they triggered off a brain hemorrhage. I came downstairs the next morning to find my dad dead on the floor. The drugs I'd gone out and got for him had killed him. Death by misadventure, they called it. That was the worst experience of my life, and I was so consumed with guilt. 9 years later, I was still consumed with guilt. And by now, I had 2 children, and I was living on my own. I started to get friendly with a girl called Jo. She's right there now. And she told me about a conference called Fixed, which was run by a guy called Barry Woodward. She explained that this conference was for ex-addicts, recovering addicts, or those with a heart for addicts, and that there'd be some seminars for people with addiction or those working with addicts. Jo said I could go if I wanted to. I didn't really know where I fitted into all that, but I really felt I needed to go. Then Jo tells me that this is going to be at a church. I'm thinking, great. I don't do church. I'm not into all that God squad stuff. But guess what? I went anyway. I walked through that door last year, and it wasn't at all what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting church to look like this. Where were all the wooden seats and the stained glass windows? This place was really modern, and there were hundreds of people here, just like there is today. I'm looking round at all these people, and I'm thinking, all these people look like my mum's friends. I was half expecting one of them to walk through that door. Maybe some of you even know my mum. Fixed 13 blew me away. I was gripped. So many times during that conference, there were opportunities for me to respond. And every time, God was speaking to me. But I just wasn't moving. Not until that very final time in the evening. And I just shot out my seat. It was right there on the 5th row, 3rd seat in, that I gave my life to God. And then I was asked to come to the front. And as I was walking to the front, I felt the guilt I'd lived with for years lift. I was so relieved. So, the following week, I decided I'd go to church. So I went to Cuckold Community Church in Rochdale, because that's the church my friend Jo went to. From the moment I walked into that church, I was welcomed with open arms. They all supported me so much. And I sat some courses with them that helped me discover my new life as a Christian. And on the 22nd of September, almost 6 months to the day of Fixed, I was baptised at my church. Being baptised was amazing. It was like no other drug I'd taken. And it was a new high I'd never experienced before. I'm now proud to say that I am indeed totally into all that God Squad stuff. And I'm very much involved in my church with the children's work and the youth, which I love. Also, in January, I started working as a volunteer at Proclaim Trust, just helping out with some administration work. And one of my roles has been to help organise this Fixed conference. to be involved in such a way is an honour. But it doesn't stop there. Because in June, I became a paid administrator at Proclaim Trust. I'm amazed at how God has moved in my life since that day I came here to that fixed conference. And now, here I am, at this fixed conference, stood on the stage, sharing my story. Wow. Life has changed so much for me since then, and all for the better. I even have an amazing man in my life, who is actually my pastor's son. And not that I'm counting him anything, but in 35 days, we're getting married. I'm really looking forward to a long and happy future together. Who would have thought that when I walked into that kitchen at 5 years old to find my mum going cold turkey on the floor, and only being able to think about finding her medicine, that I would be standing here now telling you about the ultimate medicine I found in Jesus Christ, that freed me from guilt and gave me a future and a hope. My name's Adelle Howells, and I'm the child of an addict.